Chapter 3. Mrs. Chudzik. With his fingers fumbling, Corey tried to open the oak door. His sweaty hands shook so badly he couldn't get a grip on the doorknob. Then he realized it was locked. "Stop right where you are." Corey peeked over his shoulder. Standing in the archway to the parlour was the coffin lady, looking very much alive. Her right hand held on to the collar of a large black dog, who strained to lunge at Corey. "Turn around." Her deep voice echoed under the high ceilings and bounded off the walls. Corey turned around with knocking knees. "Yes, ma'am," he sputtered. "Who are you?" "Corey Adamski," he stammered. "Where am I?" "You are at my house," Coffin Lady answered. "Where do you think you were?" Corey couldn't concentrate on the lady's questions with her dog pulling and moving closer by the minute. "Last thing I remember, I was drowning." He shuddered as the dog showed his teeth. "Yes, you were drowning, and lucky for you my dog saw you go under and came barking to me. Otherwise, you'd be hammering at the Golden Gates right now." She motioned to him to come back into the parlour. "Sit down," she commanded. As she took a seat, her dog sat by her side. "I wasn't sure you'd make it. I did artificial respiration on you. Darn near broke my back trying to get you to breathe." "I do remember hearing a dog barking," he said. After a moment, he added, "Thank you for saving me." "Thank my dog. If he hadn't spotted you, you'd be dead. Now, what are you going to do?" "I'd like to go home. My folks must be worried." He looked down at his underwear. "Where are my clothes?" "Drying on the radiators. I couldn't let you stay in those wet clothes now, could I?" No. We don't have a phone, but perhaps you could call someone to get word to my folks?" "I don't have a phone," Coffin Lady interrupted. "Never wanted one. Always ringing. When my husband, the doctor, was alive, that phone never stopped. When he died, I pulled the wires right out of the wall myself. I haven't had a phone since he passed on, almost 10 years ago." Now Corey knew he was in the big house with the turrets and gables, and the Coffin Lady was the scary Mrs. Chudzik. He would never have recognized her from seeing her in the car. At that time, she wore a black hooded cape, and the tip of her nose was all that was visible. Corey couldn't move a finger or a toe, and his legs were like straws. Standing before him was the very woman he heard caught kids like him, and they disappeared forever. As he stared at her, unable to speak, he could see her bird-like beak, the one that she used to tear flesh. Her eyes were as black and deadly as the deep water in the pond. Mrs. Chudzik had spoken, but Corey never heard a word, and he couldn't utter a word either. He just stood there, bewitched. "Didn't you hear what I asked? Did the water plug up your ears?" she yelled, startling her dog, who snarled and struggled to get to Corey again. Corey almost slid off his chair. "No, yes, my ears are plugged up from the water," he lied. "Excuse me, what did you ask me?" Enunciating each syllable with a loud voice, she said, "Do you want me to take you home? It's dark outside." Yes, please take me home," Corey begged. "I'm supposed to be home when the street lights go on." Mrs. Chudzik motioned him back down the hall to the bedroom where he had been. She turned on the light, grabbed his clothes off a radiator and passed them to Corey. "Now get dressed and we'll go." She left the room. Corey pulled on his still damp pants. "Oh boy," he suddenly realized. "If she's taking me home, that means I'll be in her car. The red 1911 Matheson touring car with the self-starting 4-cylinder vertical engine that Dad said we'll own someday." Someday. Corey knew someday would never come. But tonight, Corey would get a chance to ride in that amazing car. He imagined himself driving down Center Street in the front seat of the legendary convertible, while the McDooley twins stood on the sidewalk with their mouths open. "Come on, hurry up," Mrs. Chudzik called. "I'll wait outside." She took her dog and left. Once he was dressed, Corey walked hesitantly out into the hallway again. He heard a low hooting sound coming from another room off to the right and stepped closer to the door. Then another hoot, like an owl. Did she keep owls in the house? He looked around again at the dark rooms, then tiptoed to the closed door and knocked softly. "Mrs. Chudzik, is that you?" No answer. He put his ear to the door and heard a noise, like something scraping and clinking. Crash! The door pushed open, and before Corey could take a breath, the huge beast burst out of the room and jumped on Corey, knocking him to the floor, its tongue and teeth close to Corey's face. "Stop!" he yelled. "Get off me!" Almost immediately, the hairy dog and his wet tongue stopped, stepped back and sat up pretty, like dogs are taught to do, front legs extended, with what looked like a toothy smile on his face. The dog was sitting up and grinning at Corey. "I thought Mrs. Chudzik took you out," Corey whispered. "You scared the life out of me." The dog understood and sat down, his tail wagging non-stop. Corey carefully put out his hand to pat the dog's head, but pulled it back quickly. The dog, however, took Corey's hand into his mouth. Corey could feel the teeth, but the teeth didn't bite. It seemed to be a friendly gesture, as if they were shaking hands. In a moment, he let go, but continued lapping Corey's hand. All the while, the tail never stopped flapping. Mrs. Chudzik appeared at the door. "Taking all night to put on your clothes? Come on, let's get you home." She stopped as she noticed her dog next to Corey. "Oh, I was going to leave Hovey, but I see he unlocked the door again. He does that, with his teeth. I should have warned you. Hovey has a habit of doing what he thinks are good deeds. It's his nature. Now that he's saved you, he may think you belong to him. You'll just have to put up with it." She pulled on the black cape over her head and arms. For a moment, Corey had the vision of a large hovering bird fluttering its wings before seizing its prey. "Come along," she ordered, beckoning him with a long finger. "You too, Hovey." At Mrs. Chudzik's invitation, Hovey took off instantly. He whooshed past them and jumped into the front passenger seat of the waiting touring car that hummed and glowed in the driveway.